Barakata Yahweh, Barakata Yahweh Shai, Shabbat Shalom. All praises, glory, and honor unto the Most High, Yahweh Barasham Yahushai Barasham Rakakodash. Double honors to the elders and the apostles of the great millstone, and salutations to all you sincere Akiam. And this is your brother Abawan once again with another video. Through the spirit and power of Yahweh Barasham Yahushai Barasham Rakakodash, all praises and glory is due, especially in the times that we're in. And once again, Shabbat Shalom to you Akiam Wakwat, right? So, you know what, let me just go into the precepts first and foremost. Let's start from there. Right, that should be, here we are. So this is the book of Habakkuk 1 verse 4. Therefore the law is slacked and judgment doth never go forth. For the wicked doth compass about the righteous, therefore wrong judgment proceedeth. Right, and basically in America, Babylon the Great, right, what you have is a two-tier justice system. So let's get the definition of that word. A two-tier justice system, right? And this is why we are constantly, telling our people, I'm already here, Seth. So yeah, I wasn't actually looking at what I was doing. I'm already here. So yeah, a two-tier justice system. So let's get that two-tier justice system, right? So this is the definition of a two-tier justice system, right? A two-tier justice system is a concept describing unequal legal frameworks where individuals are treated differently for the same offenses. Disparities typically hinge on socioeconomic status, political influence, or demographic factors, leading to the perception that the wealthy bypass punishment while the marginalized face harsher penalties, right? And if you actually go into statistics and the like, you find out that the so-called Negroes, so-called Latinos, and so-called Native American Indians always get punished harsher, get harsher sentencing, get harsher punishment, are more likely to be arrested and convicted of crimes than any other group in America, Babylon the Great, which is of course par for the curse, because once again, you so-called Negroes, Latinos, and Native American Indians are the Israelites, and you are currently under the curses in this kingdom. And not only that, but the rulers, the controllers of this kingdom are Edomites, right? Esau, Edom, the so-called red man that has a hatred for you Israelites, and that is the reason why our people, right, the so-called Negroes, Latinos, and Native American Indians, alright, face so much oppression in this kingdom. And this is just more evidence of that, right? Showing you that, we as a people will never find justice in Esau, Edom's kingdom. No matter how much you vote, no matter how much concessions you make, no matter how much you try to, be an upright or upstanding citizen, or carve out a niche or a place for yourself in this kingdom, right? And this Rick Chow and Carmelo Anthony case, all it does is just proves that to a T. So let's go into it, right? South Carolina jury finds store owner not guilty of murdering in killing, not guilty of murder, so like in killing of black teen. So let's read the article a little bit, because the funny thing about these articles is you're just showing you the wickedness of Esau Edom's media and how they frame, right, the situations, and how they frame situations. Okay, so in this story, what you have was an Asian store owner. That's him and his son basically chased down a black teenager. He was 14, by the way. All the way, it reaches on a black teenager down the road, right, for what was it, 14 or so blocks, right, and ultimately gunned him down. All because they believed that he stole a water bottle, right, and there was, right, also followed by an alleged claim of him having a gun, but that is not even was never even actually confirmed if he actually did have a weapon on him, because once again he's a 14-year-old, right? So let's go into it. A South Carolina jury on Monday found a store owner not guilty of murder in the 2023 shooting of a black 14-year-old. The jury returned the verdict of Chike Rick Chow, 61, who is Asian, shot Cyrus Cormac Belton in the back after chasing him from his convenience store in Colombia, but maintained he acted to defend his son The killing sent waves of anguish and grief throughout the African American community in Richland County, right? So his claim is that, oh, it was a self-defense claim. Oh, I was trying to protect my son, right? But if you look into the case files, right, and even this article as well, you will find that at no point was either him or his son in any actual danger from this teenager. Okay, what it actually was is premeditated, cold-blooded murder. And because how are you going to shoot somebody in the back? You already done this before. You've already had this case before, even with the police, right? Where you shoot somebody in the back 13 times, right? And your excuse is, oh, I feared for my life. How are you scared of someone that isn't even looking at you, that has his back turned to you? That just shows you your cowardice, right? Where you are brave enough, you can't even face the person they are shooting like a man. Man, you are brave enough to shoot them in the back. And this is a 14-year-old kid, man. It just shows you how the justice system operates in Esau's kingdom, especially when it comes to you Israelites, right? So-called Negroes, Latinos, and Native American Indians. And it also shows you how even the other nations are confederates in, you know, your own. Well, you know what? Let's just get that. Let's just get that. I don't want to start butchering precepts. Let's go to that. So that's in the book of Psalms, Psalms 83rd chapter, right? So this is the book of Psalms 83 verse 1. A song or psalm of Asaph. Keep not thou silent, O power, hold not thy peace, and be still, O power, for lo, thine enemies make a tumult, and they that have lifted up the head, and they that hate thee have lifted up the head. And they have taken crafty counsel against thy people, and consulted against thy hidden ones. They have said, come and let us cut them off from being a nation, that the name of Israel may be no more in remembrance. And even the other nations have become parts of this of this idea right here, I should say this plan right here, in order to destroy our people, which is exactly what you see with this Moabite, right? Or Ammonites, whatever land it comes from. These Far East Asian, good. Let me not go that far, but yeah, these Far East Asian people, man. After how this is basically they have become confederate with Esau Edom. They have taken parts in his wicked ways. Okay, so now let's go back to this, okay, and it shows you that the other nations are also a part of, or I should say, the other nations are also part of or confederate with Esau, Edom, and are our enemies as well, because they are looking to destroy our people, right? You so-called Negroes, you so-called Latinos, and you so-called Native American Indians, right? The scattered Israelites that are scattered throughout the four corners of the earth. But let's keep going into it. Right. So continuing on, the killing sent waves of anguish and grief throughout the African American community in Richland County, where nearly half the population is black. After the verdict was read, sobs and cries of distress could be heard coming from Carmack Belton's family. Seated in the gallery, Charles sat silently frozen, before slowly bowing his head onto his interlocked hands. Prosecutors and a defense lawyer in closing arguments painted different pictures of the 2023 shooting. Prosecutors said Chow acted in anger because he wrongly thought the teen had stolen 4 bottles of water from the store. Right, so they have raised the number now from 1 bottle of water to 4 bottles of water. And if you even look into the story, right, and of course CNN, of course, lovingly forgot to mention the fact that this is the second case of Rick Chow actually shooting an unarmed black teen, right? Showing you that this is a pattern of behavior from him. And continuing on, a defense lawyer said Chow fired to defend his son only after the teen pointed a gun at him. And once again, I don't think they even went into this about how, oh, yeah, here it is. Prosecutors acknowledged Carmack Belton had a semi-automatic pistol, but they say it fell on the ground during the chase, and he never threatened anyone with it. Prosecutors said Chow chased the teen more than 130 yards from the store, which is roughly, I think 130 yards should be like 16 or so centimeters, right? So that's just shows you over, a couple of 100 or over 100 or so, over 100, about maybe 1,600 or so meters, right? so almost a kilometer, and that's half or so. Like maybe almost or a little. Let's just go into the Google and see how far that is, right? 130 yards, and I'm going to use the metric system because now these American calculations that are, man. And let me use the metric system. 130 yards to meters. That is 111, 118.8. Okay, 118 meters. So basically chasing down 118 meters, right? And anyway, that's basically all I want to read out of there, and that shows you, right? And he got off after from this case right here. He got off, man. No manslaughter charge, right? No first degree murder charge, even with everything that is going on here, right? Even though there is no evidence that his life was in danger, there is no evidence that he required self-defense to shoot him. There is no evidence that he actually stole any water bottles. In fact, it's quite the opposite. It is a well-known fact that he didn't steal anything. Okay, there is right, and it's the only thing that and he was even shot in the back. So how do you how do you shoot somebody that points? How do you shoot somebody in the back that points a gun at you? And it just shows you that when it comes to you Israelites, right? That Esau doesn't give a damn about you Israelites. Like the Elder Malcolm always says that Esau does not recognize anybody's human rights but his own, especially does not recognize the human rights of you Israelites, right? So let's go to this precept right here, right? And I'm probably going to use this precept as the title of this video. Now this is the book of Nahum 3 verse 1. Woe to the bloody city, it is all full of lies and robbery. The prey departeth not. So let's go and get the next article I want to bring out, right? Showing you once again, right, the system that you have under Esau Edom, especially when it comes to the judgment, especially when it comes to judgment, right? I've already read that justice and judgment does never go forth in Esau's kingdom, especially when it comes to you Israelites, you so-called Negroes, you so-called Latinos, and you so-called Native American Indian. This is the justice I can expect in Esau's kingdom, but you will still have Jakes that will tell you all about how so like yeah, having Jake is having your Jake is still I'm still having cold. It's getting better because it's getting warmer, but it's still there, man. Like I was saying, but you still have Jakes that will tell you all about how you have to fight and try to create a kingdom, right? Create a community for yourself in Esau's kingdom. But this is what you can expect in this community, where the curse, even the scriptures tell you about that, the curses will follow you, right, all throughout this kingdom, and that's exactly what you are seeing right here. Whether it's with this, with the case of that Asian store owner, or even with this one right here. This one is even the most atrocious one, right? Because this is how all of the media reported this case. Texas teen sentenced to 35 years for killing fellow students at athletics event. Bam. So okay. And any media site you go to, any media news site you go to, because I spent hours looking for is media, any mainstream media site that would actually report on this news objectively, and none of them did. It's all the same case, okay, where they're basically saying that, oh, this guy just brutally murdered his fellow students, right? So let's read the article. Now this is the what the hell? So okay, let's read the article. All right. A Texas teenager accused of fatally stabbing one of his peers at a high school athletics event in the Dallas area was found guilty by a jury on Tuesday. And it's actually funny because when it comes to this Carmelo Anthony case, it was decided in like less than a week, right? So you had the case was declared, the time of the ruling was declared, and then in just one single court hearing, he was judged, sentenced, and prosecuted, right? When normally in Babylon, you have to go and the cases are adjourned. You do an adjournment. You have the case running for over how many months before eventually the final hearing finally takes place. But in this case, it was quick, man, and the judge gave him 35 years, right? A teenager, 35 years for murder, and even gave him a murder charge, right? But let's read the article. Let's read the article. The racially polarizing trial of Carmelo Anthony over the April 2025 death of Austin Metcalf drew national attention, sparking a debate about self-defense and school safety. Both were 17 at the time of the incident. Prosecutors argued that Anthony threatened Metcalf before he intentionally killed him, while defense lawyers argued that Anthony was acting in self-defense, right? So that's exactly what was happening, right? Because if you actually, if you follow the story at the time, basically what happened was that it was raining. Of course, they didn't mention that part heavily. In the it was an athletic track meet between two schools, right? So Carmelo Anthony, which is the defendant, he was, you know, looking for a tent to stay in, right? And Austin Metcalf, which is basically the victim, was in that tent. No, you can't even really call him the owner of the tent because once again, it was a public school athletic track meet. So he wasn't even the owner. He was just the tent that his school was. It was just a tent that his school had given him to be under. So you know how these Edomites get. You know how protected these Edomites get. Over stupid shit, man. So he was talking about how he needs to leave the tent because he needs to leave the tent because it's my tent, Negro. It's my tent, Negro. Right? Him and his brother, of course, trying to jump this Jake, right? And then unfortunately Jake pulled out a knife and he stabbed him in the chest, right? Now, let's keep going into it. Prosecutors argued that Anthony threatened Metcalf before he intentionally killed him, while the defense lawyers argued that Anthony was acting in self-defense. Anthony was sentenced to 35 years in prison, right? So he got a murder charge and was sentenced to 35 years in prison. And my thing is like, what is the minimum sentence? Let's just go ahead and ask the Google, right? What is the minimum sentence for murder in Texas? Let's find out. Because you know how all these states are. Esau, you know how all these states are. Esau operates with all these states having their own independent laws, right? That's why they call it the United States of America. So yeah, the minimum sentence for murder in Texas is 5 years in prison, and they gave over 7 times that. The exact minimum sentence depends on the specific number of circumstances of the crime. Standard murder or first degree felony, which is a first degree felony. The mandatory minimum sentence is 5 years in prison, up to a maximum of 99 years or life, and a potential fine of up to $10,000. Right? So so you can either get 5 years or life in prison for a murder charge, right? And that's the thing that I'm questioning right here. So the minimum sentence is for murder is 5 years in prison, but they gave this kid 35 years. Imagine that, man. Murder under sudden passion, which is a second degree felony, if the defense can prove the crime was committed under the immediate influence of sudden passion arising from an adequate cause, the minimum sentence is reduced to 2 years of prison up to a maximum of 20 years. So they gave this guy first degree murder, right? Even though normally it's supposed to be a self-defense charge. And of course you can see the BBC, right, being the demons that they are, the British Broadcasting Corporation, by the way, being the demons that they are, did not actually give you the specifics, okay, of this case, but rather they are framing it as though Carmelo Anthony just randomly came into this Edomite's tent and just stabbed him up, right? like Carmelo Anthony, some Edomite that just randomly walks into a school and just starts shooting people recklessly. And it's funny how those Edomite school shooters get less time than Carmelo Anthony did. Okay, so let's see if the chat can actually help me with this, but let's see if the chat can actually help me with this. No, let me go to AI overview. It's better to want me to use AI overview, AI mode. Let's see. Do you know the average sentence for school shooters? Let's see if we can find that. There is no mathematical average sentence for school shooters because tracking databases like the Violence Project and K to 12 school shooting databases find that the vast majority of these incidents never reach a courtroom. So, like I said before, two-tier justice system, right? The law is slack in Esau's kingdom, and justice does never go forth, especially for you Israelites. So, in the case of school shooters, right, the cases don't even get to court. You don't even get actual court, right? And but let's see the reason why. Instead of a standard average, sentencing outcomes are dictated by three stark realities. Most incidents end without trial. A statistical average is difficult to calculate because perpetrators rarely survive to face sentencing. Comprehensive tracking shows suicide or death. Roughly half of all mass school shooters commit suicide at the scene or are killed by law enforcement. Apprehension. For those who survive and are arrested, the overwhelming outcome is either a plea bargain or a trial conviction resulting in the maximum penalty allowable by law. Let's keep going into it. Surviving adults receive maximum penalties. Adult perpetrators aged 18 or and older who survive are almost universally sentenced to life imprisonment without the possibility of parole or the death penalty because these attacks involve premeditation, multiple victims, and vulnerable targets. Prosecutors routinely secure consecutive life sentences. Examples include the Parkland shooter in Florida, sentenced to 34 consecutive life terms without parole. The Buffalo Tops shooter in New York. Though a grocery store attack, this adult perpetrator received multiple consecutive life sentences without parole, a standard outcome for mass casualty events. Juvenile sentencing varies. When the perpetrator is a minor under 18, the average changes drastically due to federal constitutional limits. The U.S. Supreme Court bans mandatory life without parole sentences for juveniles. Courts must hold specialized hearings to evaluate the minor's maturity and potential for rehabilitation before determining a sentence. This creates a split outcome. Some juveniles are still sentenced to life without parole if prosecutors prove permanent incorrigibility. For example, the Oxford High shooter in Michigan was sentenced to life without parole, a decision closely watched by legal experts, as detailed by KCRA News. Funny how they call them shooters and the name of the school, but they don't actually give you the actual name of the individuals, right? That's just interesting to me. So yeah. So that's the story of school shooters. Okay. So they actually do get convicted just without a court hearing because of how obvious and open and shut the case is. So let's keep reading this article, right? Let's keep reading this article, right? Because it does not change the basically two-tier justice system you have in this kingdom, especially when it comes to when jakes, commit these types of crimes. Because once again, right, the BBC is basically keeping out the various the BBC is basically withholding information when it comes to this case. They are not telling you about how Austin Metcalf and his brother basically threatened Carmelo Anthony and how he was acting in self-defense, which led to the unfortunate murder, right? They're not mentioning that fact. But of course, let's keep going into it. The young men were at a secondary school track meet when the incident happened. Metcalf's death was as a result of a dispute that escalated between the two rival secondary schools, according to police reports. Students testified at the trial about the heated exchange between the two, describing a rainy day on which Anthony refused to leave the tent that belonged to Metcalf's team. Though Anthony was 17 at the time of the murder on 2nd of April 2025, under Texas law, he was able to be charged as an adult. The death penalty was not considered as Anthony was a minor at the time of Metcalf's death. Throughout the trial, prosecutors called nearly 24 witnesses, concentrating their evidence on eyewitness testimonies. One of the most emotional testimonies came from Collin County Chief's medical examiner Dr. Elizabeth Ventura, who described a large gaping wound in Metcalf's chest and said the knife had pierced his heart. The prosecution students witness described Anthony as the aggressor. The defense also called multiple witnesses, including students and track coach Adam Linwood, who said Anthony had been nominated for the role of team captain. Anthony did well in school with near perfect grades that gave him a 4.0 grade point average, according to a Dallas area NBC News affiliate. The two young men did not attend the same school and had no prior connection, prosecutors said. Anthony did not testify during the trial, but his mother took the stand during the sentencing portion and said her son was sorry as she asked for mercy. On Tuesday, the Texas jury reached a guilty verdict in less than 3 hours. The judge had allowed them to consider the lesser charges of manslaughter, which would have carried a shorter sentence of up to 20 years in prison, but they did not choose it. The tragedy flooded social media, with some making the case about race. Anthony is black and Metcalf was white, but the lawyers for both sides told the jury the killing was not about race. The civil rights organization Next Generation Action Network, which had advocated for Anthony, had noted that not one juror was black. Our community, and this is in quotes, and let's just end it right there because there's nothing more to read in this article, right? So basically, what you have with the BBC is that they're just trying to frame the case. They're trying to frame the case based on what happened within the courts, and not the actual situation that was at hand, right? Not the actual thing that happened when the your killing took place at the track meets. Okay, so obviously it was a mistrial, man. It was a railroading basically, because all the evidence, all the information that came out at that time when the actual killing happened, about how Carmelo Anthony was acting in self-defense, about how Austin Metcalf and his brother, right, the victim and his brother they were basically threatening him, and they were out to try to get him out of the tent. The fact that they did not even own the tent, so they did not have the right to chase him out of the tent, right? The fact that and the fact that he had a that he knew some of the people that were in the school, or in the same school as the victim and his brother. They did not even go into that at all. He just focused on everything that would give them the first degree murder charge, by trying to frame this Jake, right, as a murderer, as just a kid that just randomly walked up to somebody's tent and stabbed them to death. So now Nahum 3 verse 2, the noise of a whip and the noise of the rattling of wheels and the prancing horses and of the jumping chariots, the horseman lifted up both the bright sword and the glittering spear, and there is a multitude of slain and a great number of carcasses, and there is none end of their corpses. They stumble upon their corpses. Right, and this is basically the way of America, Babylon decreed, especially against you Israelites, so-called Negroes, Latinos, and Native American Indians, the scattered Israelites that have been scattered throughout the four corners of the earth, right? But we're mainly focusing on, the Israelites that are scattered in America, Babylon. This is how Esau, Edom operates when it comes to our people, the Israelites. Okay, no justice, no fairness. No righteous judgment in this kingdom. Especially when it comes to you, Jakes, it's always disproportionate, sentencing, always disproportionate murdering, right? Where basically, let's get that let's get this precept right. Feed the flock of the slaughter. Let's get that, and I'm not going to go to the main point. I'm not going to go to the main point. So this is the book of Zechariah 11 verse 4. Therefore, thus saith Yahweh my power, feed the flock of the slaughter, whose possessors slay them and hold themselves not guilty. Right, and that's the reason why the police can murder Jake, right, and get away scot-free. Random citizens, your what they call this, the dude that killed Trayvon Martin, Zimmerman, right, and even this Rick Chow and Daniel Penny, these different Edomites, right, can kill Jakes in cold blood and get away scot-free, right? Zechariah 11 verse 5. whose possessors slay them and hold themselves not guilty, and they that sell them say, Blessed be Yahweh, for I am rich, and their own shepherds pity them not, right? And you still have, Jakes, even Israelites that are in this truth, right? Your Wakitaki plantation Christians and the like, your misleadership, the black unconscious groups that will still continue to tell you to vote and to protest and to organize and to do this and that in this, in order to change the system in this kingdom, right? The system that is completely against you, Israelites, rather than just for you to simply repent and return to the Most High, Yahweh Basham Yahushai, because this place is going to be destroyed, man. Hey, call Halal Basham Yahushai Basham Rakakodash. This is why you Jakes out here, you Israelites should be, elated, right? Excited, right? And patiently waiting, of course, for the downfall and the destruction of this kingdom, because there is no justice, there is no righteousness in this kingdom, right? Because, hey, man, this place is not our rest, like the scripture says, and it's only for the destruction of our people, right? It's only set up, and the only thing that is set up in this kingdom is the destruction of our people. So this is the book of Micah 2 verse 10. Arise ye and depart, for this is not your rest, because it is polluted. It shall destroy you even with a sword destruction, right? And that's the only thing that is you can expect in this kingdom for our people, right? The sword destruction. So with that, I'm going to end the video right there. Once again, all praises, honor, and glory unto the Most High, Yahweh Basham Yahweh Shai Basham Rakakwadash, Wa Abad Babala, and through the spirits I'll be Akim and Joaquath edified. Shalom.